Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a real scientific detective story, a hunt for the most mysterious thing in the universe, consciousness. We're going to try and track down where you might actually be hiding inside that amazing, complex brain of yours.
Really think about it. It's a question that's kept people up at night for centuries. But now, for the first time, scientists have these incredible tools and super clever experiments that let them actually follow the clues and start mapping out our awareness. So to find consciousness, scientists don't really look for the thing itself. Instead, they look for its footprints. They call these the Neural Correlates of Consciousness, or NCC for short. The idea is simple. What is the absolute smallest bit of brain activity that has to be there for you to have an experience, like seeing the color red or hearing a C sharp? Okay, so where did the hunt start? Well, the first most obvious guess about where consciousness lives turned out to be totally off base. The investigation took a really surprising turn right from the get-go.
For years, all eyes were on the frontal lobes, the frontal parietal network. It makes sense, right? That's where we do all our high-level thinking and planning. But new evidence has completely flipped the script. The search has now shifted to a hot zone way in the back of the brain, the posterior cortex, which is where all our sensory info comes in.
So how on earth did they figure that out? Well, this is where the science gets really, really cool. Researchers came up with something called a no-report paradigm. See, they realized that when you ask someone to push a button to say, "Yep, I saw the flash," you're mixing up two brain signals, the signal of actually seeing it and the signal of planning to push the button. By using clever, indirect measures like tracking tiny, involuntary eye movements, they could finally peel those two apart and isolate the pure brain activity of just seeing.
All right, so they've narrowed down the location. The next logical steps seem promising. Maybe consciousness isn't a place at all. What if it's a specific signal? Like a unique electrical signature, a brainwave that lights up the instant we become aware of something.
And right away, two prime suspects emerged. First up was gamma activity, these super high-frequency brainwaves that were thought to be the brain's way of stitching together all the features of an object, like an apple's color, shape, and shine. The other was the P3B wave, this very distinct electrical spike that seemed to pop up like clockwork whenever someone consciously noticed something. But when they put these suspects under the microscope, the whole case just fell apart. Turns out you can find gamma waves when people are in a deep sleep or even under anesthesia. Definitely not conscious. And the P3B wave? It was often completely missing in patients who were very much awake and aware. So these signals had more to do with attention or surprise, not consciousness itself. The search for a simple signature was, well, a dead end.
So let's recap. It's not one single spot in the brain, and it's not one simple signal. So where does the investigation go now? Well, this is where a much more complex and, frankly, a much more beautiful picture starts to emerge. It's not about a place or a wave. It's about how the brain manages information.
This new model is built on two key ideas about information. The first one is synergy. Think about watching a movie. The picture by itself tells you one thing, the soundtrack by itself tells you another. But when you put them together, you create something totally new, the emotional punch of a scene. That feeling isn't in the video or the audio alone. That's synergy. The whole is way bigger than the sum of its parts.
The second idea is basically the opposite, redundancy. This is all about making sure one important message gets out to everyone, loud and clear. It's like a breaking news alert that suddenly appears on every single TV channel at the same time. Same message, just broadcast everywhere so nobody misses it.
So how does the brain use these? The theory goes that there's a synergistic workspace. Some parts of the brain, in an area called the default mode network, act like gateways. Their whole job is to gather up all the different, complex, synergistic information streams from our senses, what we're seeing, hearing, feeling, and stitch them together. They're kind of like department heads, collecting all the different reports from across the company. Then, once that rich, unified picture is put together, other parts of the workspace, in the executive control network, act as broadcasters. They take that final integrated summary and blast it out as a clear, redundant signal to all the other brain areas that need to know what's going on. They're like the CEO who takes all those reports and sends out one single company-wide directive. This is what we're doing now.
So you get this really elegant flow of information, right? The gateways use synergy to bring all this complex information in, creating one rich experience. Then the broadcasters use redundancy to send a simple, actionable summary out. It's this constant two-step, integrate, and then broadcast.
Okay, this all sounds really good in theory, but does it actually hold up in the real world? The ultimate test for any theory of consciousness is to see what happens when it disappears, like when someone is put under general anesthesia. And well, the evidence is pretty striking. When scientists measure the brain's ability to integrate information, this metric called phi-R, they see it just completely collapses when a person loses consciousness. The brain's ability to build that synergistic whole just shuts down.
And get this, the breakdown isn't random. The model makes a super specific prediction. The failure point should be right where the information comes into the workspace. And that is exactly what the data shows. The connections that fall apart are specifically in the default mode network. The gateways disconnect, effectively cutting off the workspace from the very information it needs to create consciousness.
But as neat as this workspace model is, the mystery is far from solved. I mean, not by a long shot. In fact, it just opens up even deeper, more challenging questions.
One of the biggest challenges is something called the unfolding argument, and it's a total mind-bender. It basically says that for any complex system, like our brain, you could, in theory, build a much simpler system, like a long line of dominoes falling, that produces the exact same behaviors. And if that's true, and we assume the dominoes aren't conscious, does that mean all the complex, integrated wiring in our brain doesn't actually matter for consciousness?
And you know, this leads us right back to the biggest mystery of them all, the hard problem of consciousness. Because even if we perfectly map every gateway and every broadcaster, even if we understand the whole information flow, we still have absolutely no clue why all of that buzzing electricity feels like anything. How does any of that physical stuff create the actual experience of smelling coffee or feeling happy?
Which leaves us with a final, kind of haunting thought. This incredible hunt has taken us all over the brain, from simple waves to complex workspaces. But is this amazing scientific journey actually getting us closer to consciousness itself? Or are we just getting better and better at mapping its shadow on the walls of our own skulls?